Please welcome Thoughtworks CTO Rebecca Parsons as she discusses the responsibilities we have as leaders and innovators to the consumers of tech that we build for and how we can create a more equitable tech future for everyone. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I want to talk to you about a world where our technology does what we want it to do and doesn't harm people that we don't want to harm. So I want to talk about a world of responsible technology. So given the conference that you're at, I assume that you all think technology can be used for good. But it can also be used for malicious purposes. I doubt it's ever really neutral, but I can give you the standard consultant answer, well, of course it depends. And what it depends on is how it gets used. And this is a quote from William Gibson. I think that technologies are morally neutral until we apply them. It's only when we use them for good or evil that they become good or evil. Now, I emphasized the word we in that quote because we as technologists are the ones who are involved in deciding how we make use of technology and what technology we are putting out in the world that others can use for their purposes. And one of the problems that we have is we're problem solvers. We see a problem, we see a solution, we want to solve that problem. We're not very good at thinking about how is somebody going to misuse my technology? How is somebody going to take what I want to do and make it be used for evil? I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about solving the problem in front of me. So responsible technology is a way of thinking about creating technology, products and services that allow us to try to take into account some of these other factors, that allow us to lift our gaze just a little bit and look around at potentially other uses for this technology, or other potential markets for that technology, or maybe ways that some evildoer could misuse our technology. Now, I admit that in the world there are people who intentionally create malicious technology. But the vast majority of us, we're not trying to harm anybody. Any consequences that are negative to people are generally completely unintended. We didn't set out to do that, but it happened. So responsible tech is thinking about how do I get those additional perspectives? Can I start thinking like someone who might misuse my technology? Can I think about someone who doesn't look like me and how they may respond to that technology? Can I think about what the balance and how this might change a balance in society? So that's what responsible tech is. But why do we need it now? We've had technology, we've been building systems for decades. But 20 years ago, if some database matching recommendation engine sent you an ad that didn't apply to you, well, that isn't a catastrophic failure. I distinctly remember one day I came home and in my mail I had something advertising baby products and something asking if I wanted to join the American Association for Retired Persons. Obviously, I bought some strange combination of things that flagged up both of those, but I wasn't destroyed by that. However, credit scores are computed. There was a case I recently read about. In the Dutch government, they were using an AI model to determine whether or not somebody was eligible for child care benefits. And it didn't think about the fact that maybe the parents might be of different nationalities. And so lots of people got denied benefits that they were eligible for, and it took a long time. Criminal justice, medical decision making, and even if you have a person in the loop, when we're trying to make recommendations that are life-altering, eventually people are going to get into the habit of trusting the model. And so that human in the loop, the effectiveness of that, goes significantly down. So I want to look at responsible tech now from 3 different perspectives: privacy, equity, and inclusion. When most people think about hostile tech or malicious tech, they think about it from the perspective of privacy. What are people doing with my data? What about the surveillance state? Facial recognition technology, is this too intrusive? Even the location technology on your cell phone. I had a conversation yesterday with someone who was grappling with the problem of how much easier it would be to solve their problem if they tracked all the time and then allowed people to specifically opt out of particular location data. But then people didn't want to use it. People just deleted the app because, no, I don't want you tracking. And so how do we deal with issues like that? And the thing is, what is a privacy violation to one person might be perfectly acceptable. I was talking with somebody from our marketing department, and she said no one minds being tracked if the recommendations are good. And I said that's just not true. For many people, their privacy is important enough to them, they don't care how good the recommendations are. They'll do the research themselves. They do not want to be tracked. And so what is seen as irresponsible or malicious for some people is not for others. What about equity? One of the dreams that we as technologists have is how can we use technology to make the world a fairer place? And we need to think about, are we making choices that make sense in other contexts? For example, some of the technology that is used to make it easier for people with visual impairments to look at things is the same kind of technology that might be used for facial recognition. Okay, well, I'm trying to make something more accessible so that it's open to more people, but it's relying on a technology that is very easy to misuse in other contexts. We also think about this in terms of bias. Are we finding, as we build these models, are we finding proxies for information that we really shouldn't be using in a decision? Credit scoring, for example. If you could find a proxy for race, you might make a different decision about a credit score. Is that fair? What does an organization need to think about when they're saying, I'm going to now have to trade off, potentially, between making more money and being fair? Which am I going to choose? And we need to actually think about this in the context of other applications of technology. When the pandemic first hit and all the schools and the libraries closed, people thought, well, we have online learning, everybody can learn. And you had kids sitting outside Starbucks, poaching off of the wireless from the Starbucks because they didn't have enough bandwidth in their homes. Or they didn't have enough computer devices, and so they had to share amongst a family, and they couldn't get proper learning. We think about, isn't online learning a wonderful way of leveling the playing field? But we're making assumptions that everybody has access to the kind of technology that we have access to. And what about inclusion? Inclusion, in part, is how do I feel in an environment? Does this technology make me feel like it's good for me? Does this feel like they thought of me when they built it? Now, how are we going to figure that out? We can't have one of every possible demographic represented as we're designing our products. How might we go about figuring out whether I'm inclusive or not? Some things are obvious. There's a medical device manufacturer who created a pacemaker that was too big to fit in most women's chests. And they were fine with that. I've got a big enough market, no problem. We'll just discriminate against half the population. They weren't worried about that. But bias comes in different ways as well. And it doesn't have to be intentional to still be a problem. One of my favorite examples about this is a teaching hospital that was trying to develop a model to make a recommendation on whether or not patients after a particular procedure should be placed in the intensive care unit. But their protocol had always been to always put asthmatic patients into the ICU. So the training data that was given to these models included no mention of asthma whatsoever. There were no asthmatics. Fortunately, they trained it using two different algorithms. And one allowed them to interrogate what were the factors that were taken into account. And the doctors all looked at it and said, but what about the asthmatics? And that's when they realized their data set was biased. Now, it wasn't that they were prejudiced against people with asthma. What they didn't think about is what are the structures, what are the societal constructs, what are our processes that are resulting in this data. And so a big part of inclusion is for us to understand what is the training data that we have, how representative is that training data of my target audience? Do I have a representative enough training set? And so we want to start developing newer techniques for interrogating these data sets and making those determinations. So how do I make tech as responsible as possible? One aspect of this is let's lift up our head a little bit and not focus quite so much on just the problem that we're looking at. There are a series of techniques that will allow you to at least try to see the problem from a different perspective, to try to consider how someone else might react to this. We as technologists are very, very bad at thinking about what might go wrong with our technology. And so we have to be deliberate in making sure that we are doing things that will help us identify those unintended consequences. And I know I've been really negative during this talk, but it might be that when you lift your head up and think about a broader set of users, it's like, wait, my market is bigger than I ever thought it was if I just make these kind of changes. And suddenly, I can make more money. Unintended consequences are often negative, but they can be positive as well. And so let's try to figure out what can we do to make the tech that we are delivering as responsible as possible. Because it really is up to us. The technology is morally neutral until it gets used. And it's people like us who are looking at how we can use this. So it is up to every one of you to think about, what is the product that I'm building? What is the problem I'm trying to solve? What are the adjacencies around that problem that might allow me to take more advantage of the market, get a bigger market share or a broader market overall? Who are the people that I'm not thinking about when I develop my product? And maybe even, how would I, if I was an evil person, think about misusing this? Think about that as you're planning your features, and you will create responsible technology, and you won't be contributing to irresponsible and malicious technology. Thank you very much.